Thank you. So I'm going to talk about something I do quite a lot, and that's starting new contracts. A lot of the work I do at the moment is around looking at places where they haven't got any portfolio management PMO, or where they've got some and they're kind of a bit lost on the way. So that's a lot of what I do, and I thought I'd better cover a bit on credibility. How can I talk about this? Working in project management since the last millennium, which is kind of scary. And Roland, you're on the call, and we actually worked together in the last millennium, so it's not just me, just to say. About half of that I was delivering projects, so I'm kind of came to the light side from the dark side. But my specialism, my love, is about PMO. Set up my business in 2015. And whilst a lot of my earlier career is in banking, actually something I've really worked hard to do is to work with lots of different types of organisations. So I've got a real good breadth of experience across lots of places, and like looking at what's going on. So I'm a consultant. I do coaching and mentoring. Very recently, got into the world of training, and on a more professional basis. And I've also been doing some speaking, so really trying to spread my my experience across the place. And yes, I do love PMO. Stuff on the left-hand side you can see is just some of the organisations I've worked with. On the right-hand side, you can see me, my husband, my daughter, and yes, I do have all of those pets. At the last count, 27 chickens. With that, we probably, and I am very proud to be a lodger in the House of PMO. We've mentioned lodgers in the library. So thank you.
Surrounded by chickens, no doubt. Right, so are you ready? 10 minutes. Yes,
I'm ready.
10 slides, 10 minutes. Right, go on. John, are you on the stopwatch? Yeah. Right. Go.
So what I'm going to do is just walk through a number of tips that I would say when I go into an organisation. What struck me when I was thinking about these is lots of them are not specifically about PMO skills and knowledge, but they're about setting the scene when you go in. So the first thing, the biggest thing, is introduce yourself, not just to the person who's paying for you, but actually to everybody. Make sure they know who you are. I have done a few contracts recently that I've never actually been to the office on, to the point that working at one client, so I finally went into the office after 4 months, staying in a hotel overnight, and someone shouted Zoe across the room. Was a little bit scared. It turned out to be someone who hadn't put their video screen on for those previous 4 months, so they knew me and I didn't know them. Luckily, I didn't completely run for the hills, but it was an interesting experience. So absolutely introduce yourself, and do that to everybody that you're working on. What you're looking to achieve is to reduce some of that uncertainty and that suspicion. When I turned up and you don't always know if people know why you're there. So at one client, I turned up very excited and motivated on day one to discover that the CIO had told nobody I was coming, which was quite an interesting thing, because there was actually somebody in the role that I was looking to work on, and they were expecting to be doing the role that I was doing. So that was quite challenging, because that person in particular felt quite hostile, and indeed so did most other people, because I turned up from nowhere. So do make sure people know why you're there. I do think it's really important to say how long you're going to be there, and set out your scope. It's much easier, I think, to say what you're not doing, because that actually helps to break down barriers. And also kind of be human. I'm all for finding the common ground. If you can humanize yourself as opposed to that new person, and that's whether you're new in role or as a permanent person or as a consultant. If you find that common ground with people, then it really helps to allow you to have potentially more difficult conversations later on. It gives you that credibility, and it kind of puts that human face onto it. As I said, everyone you should do that with. One company, I spent the first 3 weeks speaking literally to about 50 people, just in a series of one-to-ones, just having a cup of coffee with them and asking them what they hated about PMO. I think people find it quite cathartic. And it also gave me a massive amount of information that I could use going forwards. Thanks, Lindsay. Don't patronise. Sounds kind of obvious. Once again, I've been in danger of doing this. Walk in there feeling really good about myself. They've brought me in because I am the specialist and I'm there to fix the world. People aren't always going to see it like that, especially if they don't know you're coming. But you do need to remember that you are not better than anybody else there. You are just the help. You are just the specialist help that's coming in. You will not fix the world, so don't promise that. And you will not know everything before you walk through the door. So whilst you have all of your experience and your knowledge and your PMO skill set, you don't know what's going in there. You don't know what's going on behind those closed doors. Even if you've been briefed on that before you walk in there, it will not be the same. So don't assume you know everything. And it's really only when you understand how people are feeling in that environment where you go in that you can really determine how best to apply your skills and knowledge and your experience. So that's really important. The other thing that I've learned is, and maybe I might have seen this with some of the bigger consultancies out there, is that there isn't, although you can use models, and I don't think you can just walk into a place and say, right, here's my model for fixing that, off we trot and we're all going to be okay. I think it's quite important to really understand what you're doing in there so you are applying the right stuff. And I nearly always build models with people. They nearly always look the same, but they're done with their language and culture, etc. Thank you. Okay, so listen and observe. I've kind of touched on this, but once you've done those introductions, stop talking, listen and learn. Try not to judge. Do not do the either the physical or the words of rolling your eyes up in your head. So don't judge. Make sure you are speaking to everyone, as I said. Write down what you're listening and observing, because that information will be really useful. Do not sympathise with people, understand where they're at, because it might be there are things there that you cannot do all the time. And do not start sharing half-formed ideas. And what I mean by that, it's incredibly easy to go and talk to a couple of people, decide you know what the problem is, and start talking about solutions before you've got the whole story. Thank you. He's a great stick man, isn't he? Okay, be clear on the brief. Now, this sounds like a daft one, but it's not only important for you to keep remembering what you are there to do, it's really important to remind everybody else what you are there to do, not least the people who've said what they want you to do in the first place. It is so easy to go off tangent. And please keep, in my opinion, reminding people of what that brief is in all of those formal communications that you do. So when I'm doing reports or presenting information, I will always repeat it in there, so the message is always there. And you know, sometimes the brief does change, but this is where you do bring some good old PMO in there. You do it as a proper change control, so that people are clear what you were doing and what has changed. Provide evidence. So unfortunately, as a result of some of that observation and you're doing in those first few weeks, you may find some stuff that's not very palatable for people to receive. So make sure that you have some evidence for it, and make sure that that thinking that you're having does make it real and relatable. Absolutely use examples. I'm really obsessed with stories and evidence and those things, and it's absolutely true. It allows you to do that, and you don't need to name people. There are different ways of doing it. We've recently done with my client a delivery survey, and interestingly we originally just had kind of yes or no's on what to do better, to stop, to improve. But what I did do is I mandated people having to write comments on that. Now, I did suspect a lot of the feedback to be kind of a little dot in the comments so they could just get past the box. The amount of information we got from that was phenomenal. It was not just the good stuff, it was the negative stuff, and a lot more came out about the culture in that. So it was really, really useful, and it allows to kind of keep some of that information anonymous. You can go survey crazy, so you have to be careful with that. Left empathizing twice, that's good. I suppose it's a reminder. Moving on to your plan. So when you're presenting back, please use common language. Thank you. Please use common language. Thank you. Yes, John, be super empathetic. Make sure that any plans that you discuss are achievable with realistic timescales. Everyone moves at different paces. Step it. Make sure you prioritize what's important to them, even if it's not the most important thing to you. Make sure that you're giving that evidence and brief. And before you do any permanent formal presentations, make sure that you have spoken to everybody beforehand and you are reflecting what they want, or what they know what's going to be reflected in there. Thank you. So understand the culture. So I've just touched on this quite a lot all the way through. Know your audience. Common language. I've mentioned this a couple of times in these slides because common language, especially on my current client, it can be a real blocker. So we've had lots of different demonstrations of Agile, for example, and it can really make a difference if you don't get that right. Getting your history and your context right, knowing what buttons not to press. Do not judge and blame. Nobody likes that. And if you do any of those things, those negative things, it will underpin your successful adoption. And that's really critical. Thank you. So top 10 tips, or the top 7 tips, sorry. So just a summary of what I've just gone through. Make sure you introduce yourself and you know that you're known. Don't patronize, even if inadvertently. Listen, 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 and observe. Be clear on the brief, and that's not just for you, that's for the people you're delivering to. Evidence is really good when you're trying to give good stories and not so good information. Keep your plans simple, prioritize on what is important to them, as well as putting those other things you need to put in there. And finally, once again, understand the culture, get the culture right, understand the context.
Excellent. Do you want to know how far over you were?
Go on.
Just 30 seconds.
Whew.
It's not bad. Well done, Zoe. Well done. Excellent. So what do we think? I mean, there's just some comments going on. There's still some comments going on about red, amber and greens. I told you. I think it's you, your subliminal messaging with these stop and go signs behind you. But I think a lot of this stuff, Zoe, also is applicable, not necessarily when you're starting a new gig. There's quite a lot of it. It feels like it can be any PMO on any given day. but yeah, what do you reckon, John?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we talked in one of these sessions about checklists. I think two or three sessions ago, and I was looking at sort of Zoe's. It's a great for going into any new engagement, and we'll all find out. There was a bit of a reaction to half-formed ideas from Lindsay there. I think everybody going through that list that Zoe sort of talked through will have had one or two that go, oh yeah, actually that's one that I probably need to think about more, because I've done that a couple of times. I'm sure everyone's got those. A great checklist. And yeah, as well, it's not just people that are going into the new things. A lot of that applies to when you're deep diving on a new project. Have cultures as well. They have their own sort of, this is how things work around here. I think those things apply well to looking at in your own organisation and what that it could help your organisation as well. So very applicable to sort of situations as well. So yeah, great. Thanks.
Lane's got his hand up. Lane, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I really liked it, and I think through the whole thing it was very consistent how you have to get under the skin, so to speak. The one point that you had about halfway through, which was I'm paraphrasing, that you have to feel how it feels, and then understanding comes rather than reading the document and, oh yes, logically understanding it. I really, really like that, and I agree. It's absolutely vital. Now, what about, because you've had a wide history, what about, I'm sure you've come across these clients, you understand all of a sudden what's really going on, but your stakeholder has a very different opinion, and his salary depends on it. So what do you do? What's your approach?
Oh, do you know what? So I've really got that happening at the moment, and actually really digging into it, and it's on my risk log, is that is that actually the culture is so important. And whilst I can't change the culture, I need to be cognizant of it. So I often find that I do become the conscience of my current stakeholder, kind of talking it through, putting in these things and going back. I do tend to be quite honest, so I do publish reports to those senior stakeholders, and I do call it out, and I give examples for why. It's back to that evidence. Giving bad news or giving news that you don't want to hear is always a challenge. But some of the work I've done has actually triggered wider value-based work that the guys are looking at. And the survey was really, it sounds daft because I kind of back away from surveys, but the information that came out of that really set what people are saying. So the senior management was saying, we don't need you coming in, put structure, Zoe. The word treacle is used quite a lot. You're just adding governance and guidance, and we're doing quite well without it. And yet, without a shadow of a doubt, one of the strongest things that came out was we need some structure, we need some guidance. And of the survey result, over 75% of the respondees, and it was a decent sample, said we either need to start again or we need to significantly change what we're doing now in terms of delivery. And just that single fact kind of really forced the senior team to have a think about it, because this wasn't me saying it, it was these guys who they thought didn't want me to come in and kind of whip up the treacle.